Hi, this is Neil from UseMyFrame.com, and today I'm going to show you how to lay out lenses for surfacing. I know a lot of machines, more and more, are doing that automatically, but this is still a key skill to know as an optician, especially working in the lab when it comes to troubleshooting and just understanding the optics of the lenses. So we're going to go through single vision, bifocals, progressives. We're going to do it all. Stay tuned. Okay, and just to get started, this is the layout machine we're going to use. It's an old AIT. Yours may be similar or a different model, but they're all going to do about the same thing. I have the camera facing in. That's where you'd be looking. And that is the layout grid, which you'll be able to see in a second. And this is the axis wheel, and this is what we would use to set our axis with. Depending on the prescription, our work ticket is going to tell us, and again, I'm going to show you all that. First thing, go ahead and get you some water and wet this little pad right here. All the layout machines I've used, usually there's some sort of whether it's an ink. We use a real diluted one so it doesn't really stain the lenses, but whatever you use, just wet it up and let's get started. Okay, so this is our view looking inside of the grid. And it's a little hard for the camera to focus, but you should be able to come out. This is our center point, and this will move left and right as we turn the knobs on the side of the layout machine. Right now I have it centered. This would be considered a zero decentration. Each one of these marks represents 1 millimeter to the left. So 1, 2, 3, and then each larger is 5. So you can quickly count to 5, 10, 16, 17, and so on. Same thing on the right. Same thing vertically. So this will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 15. Okay? I know this may be a little rudimentary for some, but I want to start at the beginning, make sure everyone's on the same page. Okay, so here I have a single vision semi-finished blank. I'm just going to take it out of the box. These are going to be, of course, the easiest to lay out. And it's nothing but a single vision, no bifocal, no progressive, nothing else to it. This is how we lay these out in the layout machine. First, usually with a wax pencil, you write left or right. And when we write on the lenses, we usually write backwards. The reason for writing backwards on the front of the lens is because we're going to eventually put surface tape over this and then a block, whether it's wax or, as we use here, alloy. That means the front of this lens is covered and you can't see the front. You can only see the back. So once we start generating it, fining, polishing, it makes it easier to look back on the lens or through the back of the lens to find out if it's a left or a right. Even though you're supposed to keep your left lens on the left side of the tray and in the left side of the machine if applicable, and the same thing with the right, but still in case of a mix-up or whatever, and some labs, big labs, may even put the tray number on the lenses. We don't, but that's something else to know. So first thing, mark your lens, and now let's set it on top of our layout machine. Okay, back at our layout machine. First, notice the concentric circles on the outside of our layout grid. And it even gives us the diameter in millimeters of each ring. 80, 71, 65, and so on. And those are just some of the more common diameters, but it definitely doesn't limit us to if we have a 75 millimeter lens, or a 54, whatever, it doesn't matter. These circles, the main help or the main guide that they give us are to help us center the lens. And that's what we're going to be doing. We want to center this lens. You want to keep your the letter that you wrote at the top. You want to set your axis if it, for what, look at your paperwork, which I'll show you in a minute, but in this case, I'm just showing how to lay it out. We'll say our axis is at 180, so I'm going to spin my axis wheel to 0 or 180. It's the same thing. And now, you notice how there's a little bit of space to the left of the ring, but on the right, it's right on the ring. So that means we need to go a little more to the left. Okay? And there, I'm about centered all the way around. And even though you can't see it on the screen, but the top and the bottom of the lens too. That's important. So we got our lens centered. Now we can go ahead and hit the button and lay it out. And there it is. Okay. And there is our lens laid out. It's a little faint, plus the background is white, and our layout marker, it lays out in white. But there you go. I guess over my skin you can see a little better. It didn't lay out too good over here. I would put a little more water on our stamper here to help that show up better. Okay, but we just laid out our first single vision. Single vision, the easiest ones to lay out. Now there are some labs that will actually put a small dot in the center of the lens. And to me, it's just overkill. You should be able to find the center of the lens, especially if you use those outside circles like I showed you. No matter what size lens you have, you can always find the center of that lens using those circles. So you put it in there, center it up, lay it out. You don't need to put that little dotter in there. Now, single vision lenses like this, it doesn't matter where we put it when we laid it out or when we originally put our L or our R on the lens. We could have done that any way we wanted. It doesn't matter because there's no reference mark on this lens. It's single vision, it's clear, nothing else to it. But say we have a single vision lens like this. This is polarized. And with polarized lenses, we know that their orientation, based on their orientation, is going to affect their level of polarization. And so, of course, we want to maximize that. And that's why these have a 180 as a reference. Now, when we lay these out, these are very simple. Let me show you how you do that. Okay, we're going to put this right on there. And you can see our line going through our 180 reference, and that's going to go right on the 180 reference in our grid. This line going straight across. Okay, we're just going to match them up. Now that takes care of our vertical, and that takes care of our axis, but it doesn't take care of our horizontal. Our horizontal, therefore, we have to use those circles and get that centered as best we can. Now we have our reference line put right on our 180, and we have it centered left, and we have it centered on the right. Now we'd be able to set our axis and stamp this one too. Let's go ahead and do that. And I left it as a 180. Okay, and there we are. Stamped it right over the top of our reference line, which also is a good, depending on how many jobs you do, but it's a good thing to check the accuracy of your layout machine from every now and then. They're usually a set it and forget it kind of machine. There isn't a whole lot to really get off calibration, though when there is, you'll have to loosen up that glass and kind of shift a little grid to correct where you need to. But it's still good, especially when you got jobs like this that are you're laying out at the 180, this kind of gives you a double check right as you're doing it. So with polarized lenses, it's important. Even though they're single vision, I have another polarized lens here. Let me wipe the front of it. This is a glass, and you'll notice that they didn't put the lines going all the way across, but they put small notches. These aren't to be ignored. These have to be put right on your 180, and your axis would be stamped just like your other ones. But you have to use these as a reference. Another one, polarized. These are the Infinite Gray from Younger. You notice that they also have that reference on the 180, so you know where to lay these out at, where to start. Put that right on the 180, set your axis, mark the lens. Very simple, but it's very important. And if you don't do it right, the polarization is going to be off on the lens. Now, there is one exception. Well, I won't say one, but these lenses, these are particularly from Visionees, these SunRx that have the mirror on them. I want to give you a heads up because these are actually very hard to see. And if you don't know better, they're easy to overlook. But right here, there is a small groove here and over here. And these are what take place of your 180 reference line. So they're still there because these are polarized lenses. Every pair of polarized lenses should have these marks, semi-finished blanks that is, and we need to keep an eye out for these and make sure we set them correctly. Okay, so that takes care of our single vision. It kind of covers all the basics and maybe then some. Let's move on to the next kind of lens. Okay, the next set of lenses we're going to look at are bifocals, and of the in flat top bifocals, because there's round bifocals too, but bifocals are probably going to be the most trickiest, and that's just because how you have to lay them out in the layout machine. If there's a critical concept you have to understand, otherwise you're going to get them all wrong. As long as you get that, they're actually pretty easy, but starting out, compared to single vision and even progressives, they're probably the more difficult. So let's break these down and see how we lay them out. Okay, first thing we got to look at is in our layout numbers. Now these are we use Innovations. These are our work tickets. Your work ticket's going to look a little different. But somewhere there's going to be a surfacing section, and there's going to be a layout in, or a layout horizontal, and a layout vertical. And in our case, it goes layout in and then up, in and then up. And in this case, since these are negative numbers, these would be down. Okay, so we're going 6.5 to the left, 6.5 millimeters down. Yours may say in, or down, or up, or out. And each one's different, but they all will get to the same tell you the same information. And just as a reference, here are the single vision ones that I was showing earlier, and you notice how their layout in and up is 0. Why is that? Because those are just going to be centered. Right, and there was no, other than the polarization marks, there was no reference as to where the lens should be, so we centered it in the circles. With the bifocals, we have the bifocal as a reference. And what these numbers get us to, at least how we have our labs set up here, is to lay out these lenses in the center of the lens. So when we move this bifocal 6.5 millimeters in and 6.5 millimeters down, and we mark or stamp this lens, we should be in the very center of the lens. That's what these numbers are telling you. And you can actually put your lens in the middle and stamp it and take a look, and you should be 6.5 in, 6.5 down. That's more something later you'll learn. I don't want to put too much hay on the fork here, but now let me show you how we look at these in the layout machine. Okay, here we are back at our layout machine, and we're going to do these bifocals. Now, our vertical measurement we're getting from these lines here, right? So this would be 5 down, this would be 0, this would be 5 up. And our horizontal we're getting from these going on our 180 line. This would be 5 left, 10 left, 5 right, 10 right, and so on. Now, we can move, when we get to actually laying these out, we're going to be moving the center line however many millimeters to the left or to the right. And if you remember on our work ticket, it said 6.5 to the left for our left lens. That would be 6.5 to the left. But before we do that, let's pretend this is a 0. Okay, let's start there. So our layout, we're going to say for this left lens is 0 vertical, 0 horizontal, right? So there's no line for us to move vertically, but there is one for us to move horizontally. What is our horizontal number? 0. It stays right there. Okay? Now, these 6 lines, actually 8 lines, 1, 2, 3, and then this one out there, 4, and then 1, 2, 3, and this one out there, 4 on this side. These are the lines that you're going to use to center your bifocal. Okay, and the reason that you notice that they're the same on each side as far as spacing goes, and they're symmetrical. So for this bifocal, which is a 28 millimeter flat top, this is how I'm going to line up. My vertical, I'm putting the vertical right on 0. And I'm centering between those groups of lines. You know, basically that third outside line on each side. That's where my bifocal's sitting. Not like this. You see, yeah, I'm lined up on this side, but this side is off. Right? It has to be here. This is your 0. And not lined up with this one way out here. That's not centering our bifocal. This is where our bifocal should be. Notice it's right on the edge of that third outside line on the left, and it's right on the edge of that third outside line on the right. And the bifocal is flat, sitting straight across our 180. It's not tilted, right? Because you can have it. See, I'm on the line on the left and I'm on the line on the right, but see how my bifocal is tilted? That's no good. It's got to be right on whatever drop, right? And in this case, our drop is 0. That's how we would correctly lay out a 0 in, 0 down. Now, what if our drop was 5 down? It would look like this. The more examples I give you and you see how they're done, the more this is going to make sense. What if it's 10 down? Right here. You see that? You can't be over here, shifted off to the side, one way or another. You got to be directly in between those lines symmetrically. Now there's different size bifocals, and that's why those lines are there. That's not just one set of, it's not just that third outside line, even though that's all we would need to lay out this particular bifocal, but there's smaller bifocals. There's 25 millimeter bifocals. There's big bifocals, 35 millimeter bifocals, in which case you'd be using these outside ones to line up. So no matter what your bifocal size is, as long as you stay in the center symmetrically, you're going to always lay it out right when you have the correct decentration and drop. Okay? Now, we know how to drop it. We know, okay, now, for example, let's say it's a -5 drop. The lens won't fit up there very good, but this is how that's going to look. Okay, and I'm actually shifting off. It's resting on top of the little pad. It should never be there. If you see that and your lens is laying out like that, something's wrong. But that's how it would look. Okay, just to give you an idea of what all we're doing. So the vertical is very simple. And our horizontal, we see how we have to use those lines that are there as a guide. Now, let's say our decentration is 5 in, 5 down. I'm going here, that's 4, 4.5, 5, right there. Now I'm going to grab my lens again. So I have my decentration based off of this middle line, which is also moving those 3 lines that I'm using to center this with. And here is how 5 in and 5 down should look. It's sliding a little bit, but okay, not like this, not off to one side. You have to look at those 3, the groups of 3 lines, center it. Okay, there it is. Now in this case, ours was 6.5 in, 6.5 down. So we go 5, put it right on 5, 6.5. And we would have our axis set. We'll just put it at 180 for now. And there's our stamp. See right here. Right there. Does that make sense? And this is a left. And you notice, if sometimes it's easy to confuse a left bifocal for a right bifocal, but if you draw an imaginary line down the middle of the lens, what side is the bifocal sticking more on? And you see, or more out of. And in this case, it's sticking more out toward the left. This is your left bifocal as you're looking at the top of it. Okay? So, a little more complicated than our single vision, but definitely once we get the fundamentals, it's not all that bad, right? Let's do our right lens just to see. So we're going to come over this. Now when you're doing your decentration, your left lens is going to be decentered to the left, however many millimeters the paper says, unless it's negative. Your right lens will always be decentered, however many millimeters your work ticket says, unless it's negative. So in our case, our right lens is also 6.5 in, which would be 6.5 to the right. We grab our lens, and we're going to put it, I always like to put it right at the 5, because the 5 mark is darker, so it helps me align the bifocal up easier to get it started. And then say it was 4, then I could just kind of pinch the lens up a little bit and be right there. In this case, it's going to be down 6.5, boom, right there, right there. Now the stronger the bifocal, the bigger the shadow on the top of the lens is going to be. And so you have to be consistent. So, and what I try to do is try to, it depends on even the size, even the width of the bifocal. So you have to be consistent in how you lay it out. If you lay it out at the top of a shadow of the left eye, you line it up like this, then you have to do the same for the right. That's the key. Now, so we did our single vision clear, we did our single vision polarized. Let's go ahead and do our progressives next. Okay, before we go to progressives, There's one other bifocal I want to do or show you, and that's your trifocal. Trifocal, tri meaning 3, so you got a power for the distance, a power for the intermediate, and a power for the near. These are, as long as you know how to lay out a bifocal, you already know how to lay out a trifocal. The only difference is, instead of laying it out with this line, you're laying it out using the top line. Let me show you how that looks. Okay, so a quick peek at our work ticket shows us that for our left eye, let's go ahead and mark that left. We need to bring it in 5 millimeters and come, ours says up -2. So that actually means we're going to put it 2 down. Okay, so we're going to be coming 5 in, 2 down. Let's go to our layout machine and see how that looks. Okay, here we go. We want 5 in and 2 down. And just to look, I'm going to look at our axis. Our axis was 120. So I'm going to go ahead and set our axis wheel at 120. I always get into the habit of, whenever I put a lens on the glass, I come right up and change my axis. It's so easy, especially when you get into the groove of doing a lot of lenses, you know, a lot of jobs. It becomes routine, and it's so easy to forget to change your axis. So put your lens on the glass, change the axis. Okay, and even before I put my lens on the glass, this is when I would do my decentration. That way I got my right hand I'm using to bring this in. And remember, our decentration was 5 in, 2 down. I'm doing a left lens, so I'm moving my marker to the left, and now I'm ready. Okay, the other thing you want to know, here's another tip, is do not move this line while you're looking through the lens. There is a little bit of parallax, and even though you can have the line look straight, when you're looking through the lens, when you pull the lens off, it can actually be a little bit off. So that's something to know. It's always best, you know, it depends on the base curve of the frame. It depends on the strength of the bifocal. There's a lot of different variables, but the best thing, the safest thing, is leave the lens off while you move that. Okay, so we got our 5 in from our center line. Now look, we're not using this line anymore. We're using this line, and then we're going centered in between these groups of three vertical lines, and it was 2 down. So we center it. You can even come up here to put it on the 180, make sure it's straight across, and then come down 1, 2, right there. We're good on the left, we're good on the right hand side, we're even. We're looking, another thing I like to do is kind of take an overall look of the space between the bifocal and the 180 line, make sure it's even looking, and then we can go ahead and stamp it. Okay, and there we have it. Our axis is at 120, and it's going this way. It's a little faded, but there we have a trifocal correctly laid out. Okay, now we're going to do the progressives. And the progressives, as I said, can actually be easier than the bifocals and trifocals. You're basically centering it. And let me grab another lens. So I have here a non-decentered, this is a novel, and when we look at it, that just means that our markings are in the middle of the lens. The tray that I use as an example has actually decentered markings. So I wanted to make sure we started off baby steps first, okay? So this marking puts this lens right in the middle Okay, now decentered lenses are good because more and more frames are bigger. It helps with the cutout. So let me show you this one. So this lens, if we were to, I don't have a job printed up for this, but if I did, it would be a horizontal measurement of 0 and a vertical measurement of 2. This has a 2 drop. Okay, so this is how this type of lens would look laying out. Okay, now for our progressives, we can go ahead and just center our center line like that. And we want a horizontal measurement of 0. So that puts us right here, 0, left and right. Put that dot right on the 0 mark, and then put that 180 reference line straight across our 180 reference line on the layout machine. And then you'll notice that the fitting cross is 2 millimeters up. And why these are so easy is because these are going to be centered right on there. You put this dot in the middle with these reference lines on the 180 and your center, because your drop is already there. See that? And that's just how we would lay it out. Just like that. Okay? And that's how we would have that laid out. My line's a little faded, but it doesn't matter. Another tip, if you find your after surfacing, you find your layout marks are coming off due to surfacing. You know, they take the tape off, they clean the lenses, and by the time they're done, all your markings are gone. You have to relay out the lens. What you can do is after this point, after you stamp the lens, first you're going to want to put your mark on there, your left or your right. Stamp your lens, and what you can do afterward is with your same grease pencil or wax pencil is lightly draw over your layout markings like that. Now when your surface tape goes over it, you surface it, you pull off the surface tape at the end, it's not going to take away your layout lines as much. Okay, it's a little tip. You can use little stickers. You can buy little stickers that do the same thing, or you can just use your wax pencil. Whole lot easier, whole lot cheaper. Okay, now let me show you how you do the decentered progressive lenses. This is how they look, and all that means is that that fitting cross is not directly in the center of this lens. But let me show you here. So notice on here, our work ticket shows us that our layout horizontal is not 0 like it would have been for that other one. Instead, it's a 250, a 2.5 in, and a 2.5 and a 2 millimeters up, right? And by doing that, remember the purpose of these numbers is to get us to lay out the lens in the center, so when we block the lens, it's laid out in the center. Why? So that it has the most even distribution of weight when it goes to fine and polish. Okay? So let me show you how you take this and go 2.5 in and 2 up. Very simple. Here we go. We could leave, you can move your horizontal line 2.5 if that helps you. 2.5 in, and then match your line. Put your dot right here, not here, that would be 0, but put it right here and make sure your axis is correct. And there you go. You have it 2.5 in, 1, 2.5 in, 2 up. And you notice, as long as you put your 180 reference, your fitting height is automatically is already in place. So that makes it very simple. Okay, now if we didn't have this, which usually I don't do that, because once you get used to it, you know it's 2.5 in, so you don't need to move the line. You'll get used to it too if you're not already. Boom, right there. Mark your lens. You're good to go. If you need to mark it up, mark it now. Put your wax pencil over it. You're good to go. Okay, there's one last lens I want to show you how you lay out, and that's your round bifocal. Your round bifocal is a lot like your flat top as far as laying it out, only because it's round, you don't have a straight reference. And with that, it can get confusing as to where the lens should lay. And there's a little wiggle room, literally, as to how you can lay this lens out. So let me show you how this would look. Now, I don't have a printed work ticket for this, but I'll show you how this lens would lay out. First thing we'll do is we'll mark our lens. We'll say it's a left. So put your bifocal straight down. Put your L on there backwards like I showed you earlier. Now we're ready. Some people will take a felt tip, one of these felt tip markers like this, and draw around the perimeter of that bifocal. Especially with a blended bifocal might be more necessary, but for these, you should be able to see them okay. Okay, so let's take a look at that. Okay, here we go. We're going to leave our decentration at 0. And okay, our bifocal's coming in pretty good. Should be able to see it pretty clearly. Now remember the purpose of those layout lines is to get you to the center of the lens. Now, depending on where the axis falls and how much decentration you have, if this lens was this lens's natural drop is going to be, it's going to be around a 7.5. Just by looking at the lines and how everything's lining up. But let's say, now if it were like this, that would be very easy, okay? All we're going to do is center our bifocal. We're centering it between those 3 lines again, just like we did with the flat top bifocal, only these don't extend out to that 3rd line. They're smaller. These are actually 24 millimeters. Okay, and we go down we'll just say our 8 down. And then the critical point about round bifocals is you need them even. You need them even around the edges. Okay, that's where it gets tricky. Now, if this was a 0 decentration and 8 drop, this is exactly how we would lay that out. Now, where it gets different is, let's say it's a 7 in. Or we'll say an 8. We'll make it 8 and 8. Okay, so we got our 8 in. We'll put this at 8 down. Center it between those lines right there. But now look, because this bifocal is round, I can go anywhere. Where is the correct way to put this bifocal, right? Assuming I stay, I see I'm drifting, but assuming I stay in the center of those lines and right at 8 down, how do I swing the top part of this bifocal? The answer is you swing it to the point where it's centered. So right now, I'm not centered. I'm heavily over to the left side. See that? There's my centric ring on that side, and here I am on this side. I need to balance that. So we're going to bring that over. We still want to keep our 8 down. And we still want to keep our 8 in, like that. But we want to shift the top of that lens. We want to twist the lens. In this case, I'm turning it to the right. keeping my 8 down, keeping my 8 in, centered between those, and now this is centered on those outside lines. Now I can go ahead and stamp my lens, whatever my axis was. That's how you lay out a round bifocal. And that's what that would look like. Only the line would be a little longer. But anyway, that's how you lay out lenses for the surface department. I hope this helps. Thanks for watching.